Hi, welcome back everybody for another podcast. I'm super excited to be here today with Carla Ferraro, Sean Sands, and Vlad Demsar, all from Swinburne University down in Australia. And they're joined, or we're here talking about the article they've got, which is co-written with Andrew Kahn from the General Store. And the article is titled "Harmony or Discord: The Intersection of Generative AI and Human Creativity in Advertising." So, a very topical piece to go through and take a look at. So, thank you all for being here today to talk more about that.
Thanks for
Thanks for
having
having
us.
us.
Awesome. So first question for people who may not have come across your article yet and read it, can you give me like a quick sort of overview of what it is that you go through and take a look at in the article?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. So it's kind of an article where we explore the role of Gen AI and how it's changing primarily the role of creativity in advertising and how humans and tech are kind of working together at the intersection between those two things. So in doing that, we interviewed senior advertising and marketing professionals to really get an understanding of how they're using Gen AI now in their businesses, what it means for them in terms of the creative process. And we really found that Gen AI is seen as this powerful augmentation tool. It's speeding up things like idea generation, content creation, and testing. But despite all the negativity that's been spoken about replacing humans in the workflow process, we're seeing it's not really replacing human creativity. It's definitely what we're seeing is the professionals we spoke to highlight more like opportunities for efficiency, for scale, but they do also mention concerns around originality, ethics, and developing an over-reliance on historical data and then being tied to what's been done before as opposed to coming up with truly new and innovative ideas.
Okay, interesting. So more about efficiencies and some sort of concerns around the creativity. Do they see its use expanding potentially in the future, or do they see it as something that is likely to stay that same way going
No,
forward?
I think it's definitely at the moment it's getting a handle on how it's working, what it can be used best for, and kind of understanding the guardrails that are in place or building guardrails around particularly the larger firms we spoke to really build in processes as to how it's used. And then I think there's really a test and learn environment where they're looking to kind of see how we can really leverage this tech.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, because I think a lot of agencies, at least the ones I've spoken to, are also trying to figure out what is the best way to integrate it. And I think everybody kind of has this fear that they're behind on that as well too.
Sure.
Yeah. So what does this mean? What do you think? What are the takeaways for advertisers then? This is very relevant to agencies. What should they be doing in response to the neat research you've gone through and done?
Yeah, I can take this one. I think some of the key opportunities lie in that efficiency that Sean spoke to and really being able to streamline those creative workflows, testing ideas and concepts perhaps before they get to market, and even just widening the net in terms of brainstorming possible ideas and ways in which to actually bring that creative process to life. I think one of the key things we heard is that, and Sean also touched on this, is that the use of Gen AI really is more of a collaborative approach and should almost be seen as a creative partner, not replacing that sort of human oversight or that human input, which is really important for things like strategy, storytelling, that emotional side of advertising, and also looking at things like brand fit. That really is the role that humans have to play going forward, regardless of how this technology evolves. But importantly, and again, Sean touched on this, there are some guidelines that need to be put in place and boundaries around its use, particularly ethically within advertising agencies. So there's still a lot of work to do in that sense, ethics, legal sort of boundaries, and just the importance around transparency when it is being used.
Yeah, no, very true. Yeah, I know that there's been some concern around using models that were trained on copyrighted material that people didn't have access to and things like that, right? And I've seen new ones coming out that are explicitly saying that they were trained on models is using data that is actually royalty free, so that you can go through and not worry about that part.
Yeah, absolutely. And off the back of that is how do you train your people, staff, within the agency around that so that they're using it in a way that's sort of aligned with all of that.
Awesome. So a question I always like asking as well too is where did the idea come? And I'm guessing it might involve some of the people on your team, so that you've got a wide deck in terms of
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, sure. I think one of the areas where this came from is that we've been watching how quickly Gen AI tools like ChatGPT and various image and video generators are sort of being adopted across the industry at the moment. And there's both a kind of rapid uptake and a general excitement, as well as an element of uncertainty. And it kind of made it a really timely point to capture how practitioners were feeling about sort of using this technology in-house. We also know there's a bit of a gap in the literature currently around the impact of Gen AI on creativity specifically, rather than just focusing on efficiency or automation as a standalone. And I think also the project kind of grew out of some conversations that we were having with industry professionals that we're sort of networked with who were currently experimenting with Gen AI, but kind of had lots of unanswered questions about its role within the creative process. And I think throughout those conversations, we kind of surfaced some, day-to-day frictions around the kind of legal, ethical, as well as the aesthetic impacts. And we thought that we could really unpack that with a qualitative, in-depth study.
Yeah, well, we're very glad you did. Yeah. Next one as well is also kind of a fun question to go through, but it's really thinking about the challenges you might have encountered in, completing your article. And one of the things I always like to say on this podcast, I think, especially for junior researchers, we often see these articles that are published, and they look so beautifully done, like yours, and very cleanly, presented. But in many cases, there's a lot of like headache and, challenge that might go on the back end. I don't know if that's true in your case, but I think just for the benefit of, younger scholars, were there any challenges you encountered? And if so, how might you have gotten over those as well?
Yeah, I'll say that. Probably looking back, there's a couple of challenges we faced. I think very early on in the ideation stage, one of the initial challenges was like, how do we fund this? Because we wanted to do interviews, we wanted to incentivize our participants. And we were lucky enough at the time, and this goes back about 18 months or so ago now, when we started the project, that we saw an open grant invitation through the Australian New Zealand Marketing Academy and partnered with the Australian Marketing Institute. So we applied for that grant. One of the criteria for that grant was actually having an industry partner. So that ended up helping us solve a second problem that we faced later on. We're lucky to get the funding. The second problem we kind of faced was, how do we speak to senior staff across the industry and really make sure that we were speaking to people that had a full view of the business, so that they could kind of give us the top-down perspective of where they see the challenges, where they see the opportunities, and where they see the future. So working with the general store was one way that we actually got fantastic access to industry. We spoke to a number of people, senior execs, senior creative directors, and we had, what was initially a bit of a problem for us was really a door that was open through our partnership with the general store here. So yeah, that was kind of the, from ideation to execution. I think in actually doing the interviews as well, there was a couple of challenges that we faced. One of them was around really being sure that we're capturing honest insights. We want people to be as honest as possible and open up to us about the pros and cons, what they see as the challenges in the future. And I guess there's probably some people, when you speak to them, you're doing these kind of interviews, they're a little bit hesitant to be too open. Probably they're giving away their company secrets, particularly with this kind of an idea and a topic, because they're trying to develop proprietary systems maybe. So, we had all the ethical things in place around university research, and, we guaranteed anonymity, and we're not going to identify companies and things like that. So you'll see in the report, in the paper, we have this kind of way of hiding the size and name and of the company and so on. So I think we're pretty successful in getting honest insights. Probably a couple of the brands we spoke to were at the forefront of developing proprietary systems. It didn't give us a lot of specifics and technical information, but we didn't necessarily need that. So we had to recognize that there were some things that people just wouldn't be willing to open up with. And then I think the other thing, just from us stepping back and as a team looking at the data once we'd collected it, just thinking about balancing the optimism of Gen AI that people were talking about versus the cautions, and trying to navigate through that kind of forest of the data to really pull out the insights, theme them together, and build a bit of a picture and narrative as well. So I guess for us across the journey, that was those were the main issues we faced.
Yeah, definitely big ones as well too. Very, very tough, talking to industry folks, and very tough, obviously always getting funding as well too. Yeah. So final question is where to next? So very neat, very important to, study. I'm guessing that there's ideas you've got for follow-ups you may be working on already. But I'm curious, where do you think are the places people should be going or you might be going with this in terms of next steps?
Yeah, I might kick us off with this one. I think, as you say, Colin, there's the avenues for future research from here, obviously, quite substantial, lots of different sort of angles. And some of the ones we've been talking about and also doing a lot of work in is just digging a bit deeper into consumer sort of reactions to and perceptions of, advertising created in this way. Do they want to know? If they know, do they care? Is their behavior engagement changing in response to that? Versus sort of human created ads. So lots of opportunity there and ways to look at that. Maybe looking across markets and industries, because the opportunity in this space is relevant, regardless of industry or even geography, but trying to understand that maybe in more developed markets versus, less developed markets in this area, that might show some interesting insights. Looking at team dynamics. And as I said earlier, trying to understand this hybrid sort of way of generating advertising and looking at both the consumer side and that sort of, the human on the other end that's either interacting with the AI or, parts of their role is actually being sort of not replaced, but really the opportunities for AI might be significant. Brainstorming, for example, and what does that look and feel like to humans sort of engaging and using the tools? And I guess finally, maybe some longitudinal work, having a look at some of these effects over time and maybe working with an advertising agency or a brand or a number of brands and looking at some real-time data and actually testing and learning from the field in terms of what these opportunities are and again, how consumers are responding and possibly also on that human sort of side.
Yeah, that would be very neat. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you all for coming on and telling us more about your article. I'm very excited to have that out available online. So again, for those who are interested, it's titled Harmony or Discord, the intersection of generative AI and human creativity in advertising. And it's by Vlad Demsar, Carla Ferraro, Sean Sands, and Andrew Kahn. And so thank you again all for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.